This is going to be a video on how to beat CastleVania I with just the whip. The assumption here is that you've already beaten the game at least once, as it is sort of a necessary trial by fire to ensure you even have a chance of doing this with the whip without suffering too much. Now, the first few levels are fairly trivial. They are made in such a way that it should be easy for the player to accomplish this. So, I won't have much to speak of there. What I will mention though is regarding the bosses, because the bosses can be approached in one of two ways, and that is to spam, or to actually attempt to maneuver against them. The third game is more true to a game in this aspect, in that its AI is more well refined, which is fitting as it is the third game and not the first game. I just feel like that needs to be pointed out because people harp that the third game is more difficult, but it is also more fair in a sense. But continuing on, for the first level there is nothing to speak of except for the bat. To fight the bat, you would want to continue to move left and right at the bottom of the screen. Now, when you see the bat move slightly low, you would want to jump and strike. You have to be mindful though that it will swoop down in response, and when it does that you have to duck, or slightly move and duck to avoid him swooping. One of the key issues here though is that sometimes he does swoop a bit too low and will hit you anyways, but for the most part this is the first level, first boss, so even if he swoops down and hits you a couple times, it'll take barely any damage and you'll wind up killing him rather quickly. Moving on to the second level, again there is nothing much to speak of, except for the boss, which is the Medusa. Again, the AI is not the best, but the idea is very trivial. You strike with the whip, and when you have the chance, you jump over the Medusa head, because hopefully it will position itself below you, allowing you to actually clear the jump over it. This is easier on the right hand side, so I would honestly say strike from the right, do as much damage as you can, move right, jump onto the ledge, then jump over and continue striking from the left side, and it'll probably die before you have to jump over it again. That is something, and I'll actually touch on when I speak in the third game, where plan for the fight as a whole, where use what you have when you need it so that you can kill it before you're actually cornered. Moving on to the third stage, this is the first time that the level itself has something to be mindful of. These are two things, and that is the hunchbacks and the crows. The issue with these are usually the impatience of the player, especially as most people view a game as something random or chaotic when it's really well defined by rules. So when the hunchbacks jump, they will jump down and they'll pause for a brief moment, but it is a moment, and that's when you can strike. Should you fail to do so, some people would react erratically and move, but that's just it. This enemy is meant to jump around. So by moving, you're sort of increasing the odds that you will get hit. So the best thing to do is just stay in place and react instead to where you see the hunchback is moving. So here you can just walk forward, the hunchback appears, it jumps in front of you, you strike. Easy. If you miss, then it jumps around you, and you just calmly wait, see where it lands, turn and strike. Very basic. For the crows or ravens, whatever they are, it's sort of similar. They will appear, and then they'll pick one of few options. They will appear above you, appear in front of you, or sometimes below you. regardless of what they do, the whole point is, again, just to wait and see where they position themselves. If it's just slightly above you, jump and strike. If it's right in front of you, strike. If it's slightly low, kneel and strike. The only real interesting one is if they choose to go fully below you, in which case just take a step or two, just a small step or two, to the left or right, to bait the crow into moving upwards. At that point it'll be in your line of, I don't know if you'd say firing or not because it's not a gun, but until it's in your line of fire to strike. Now after this is the boss, which is the mummy. This is one of the more chaotic bosses in which really the idea of just whip it is sort of the answer. There is very little room for technique, I'd say. If there is any technique, it would be that when you start the stage, you are placed in between the two. And unlike in the third game, they can move everywhere. So the key thing you'll want to do is get out from in between them. Whether that's on the right or the left, I'd prefer the left because I think there's a slight safe spot, at least for their stepping on the left side. But once you're out of being from between them, you can strike both at once and deal a lot of critical damage. I would also recommend standing slightly away, your whip's length distance actually, so that you can easily react to the bandages. Usually there will be enough time to just slightly move, because notice that they move in a, I don't know if you'd say, sinusoidal wave pattern. So you see it coming down low, take a step forward or a step back, just so that it crosses in between you. And if it's in front of you, I do recommend striking with your whip so that you dispatch it and don't accidentally screw yourself later. And if it comes from above, well, again, take a step back and strike. Maybe, depending on where it is, take a slight jump and have it go under you. It's all about taking it slow and steady and taking it in what's happening. For this next stage is the creature. I don't think it's Frankenstein, right? It's Frankenstein's monster, but for this stage there is a bit more to be mindful of. The first thing is the rafts. Now, it isn't an issue on the first playthrough, but on your New Game Plus, there will be a section where the fish will jump out, right? And if you're just on the middle of the raft, you'll get knocked back into the water. What you actually have to do at times is to take a step forward on the raft, and then quickly take a step back to bait the fishman to jumping out before you're directly over it. In this way, you have a chance to strike at it. However, there are other times, in particular near the end of the level, where a fishman can pop up, and there really is no way to bait it. So your best option is to actually stand furthest right on the raft, so that when he jumps up and strikes you, the knockback keeps you on the raft, and you continue on. For the next section with the Harpies and the Hunchbacks, again harkening back to our previous approach to the Hunchbacks, you should take advantage of the 1 second where they first land to just strike. It's a very rhythm-based thing. They fall, they hit the ground, strike, fall, strike, fall, strike. If you miss it, it actually moves a bit. Again, just stop, watch where they jump to, strike. Even if you get overwhelmed, the idea is to not freak out. Realize you have invincibility, sort of see if you can walk forward and get a clear in, and then strike. For the Hunchback and the monster, there is a bit more finesse that can be done than with the mummies. However, I would still say it's a bit random. Again, the AI isn't perfect in the first game. I'd say the key approach is to first just do some strikes, obviously, because you can quickly stun the Hunchback along with the monster. immediately at the start. You'll quickly become unstunned though, so you'll want to back away. The key point though is there is a means to jump over the hunchback when he does his jumping. So the whole idea is to walk backwards, bait him, jump over him, rinse and repeat. Obviously you will likely still get hit because of his erratic pattern and just keeping track of everything being a bit difficult. But all in all, the idea is just to mitigate damage so that, unlike when you just attempt to whip endlessly and recklessly, you never wind up in a situation where, whoops, I'm so close but I died. It's either something where it'll go really good, or you'll see yourself getting quickly dispatched, but it'll feel fair. For Death stage, there isn't much to speak of except for the Death hallway and Death himself. In the Death hallway, there are the Medusa heads flying and the Knights. Now, although it is shown in the AVGN episode that there's a lot of stuff on that screen, the actual difficulty lies in the fact that if you stop moving, that's when you get fucked. Because when you stop moving, you will have Medusas coming from the front and potentially the back, especially if you walk backwards. But if you just keep moving to the left, they will always tend to come from the left, and when you strike at the Knight, you'll likely strike the Medusa, and everything just sort of works out. To accomplish this, what I honestly recommend is, once you go up the stairs, there will be maybe one Medusa coming from the right. Just wait, jump over it, or strike it, whichever you choose to do, and then start moving left. Just keep moving left. The Medusa head comes from the left. Because you know it is a sinusoidal type wave pattern, just see it. If you know it's going to line up with your whip, strike. If it's not, do a jump forward and strike with your whip. The reason to strike forward with your whip is obviously to hit the Knight, and you'll want to hold the button down because your whip actually does remain active for a brief second longer if you do so. This is particularly useful when falling. This will help you because if the Knight were to throw an axe while you're mid-jump, your whip would run into it and eliminate it as you're falling. It should also be noted that whether the Knight throws his axe from the top or from the bottom, if you're standing on the flat ground, your whip strike will destroy it either way. And so you just repeat this and do this for both Knights, and you should easily get through. As for Death himself, again, unlike in the second game, which although is claimed to be harder, is actually more polished, to do this whip only is fairly difficult. You have a lot of the screen taken up by the bottom blocks, which gives you less room to move. Furthermore, unlike in the third game, where it seems as if Death avoids you, I don't know if that's technically true, but he avoids you more than in this one, where Death can just run into where you are and destroy you. Destroy your attempt to escape the side, that is. So the only real way to approach this is to be focused on the scythes more so than Death. You have to sort of view it as a war of attrition, I guess. So you move towards the location, the scythes lock onto you, and then before they strike you, you move slightly, just ever so slightly back, so that they cross in front of you and you just strike them. And whenever you get a chance, that's when you strike at Death. If you're lucky, he'll position himself in a place where you can strike him repeatedly, but if not, you can just do it slow and steady. This might take a few attempts, if not a lot of attempts, while you get used to baiting the sides and striking them. With Death dead, you then move on to the last stage, which is just the lead up to Dracula. This first section is the most BS part, because the bats are way too difficult to kill with just a whip on terrain that you can be easily knocked back into a hole on. So for this, I honestly recommend just walking forward. The most you can do in terms of skill here is just, at times, you can pause yourself. What I mean is stop walking, which will, at times, give you a second to see how the AI of the bat will react. For example, there is one that comes from below, where he might go through the platform that you're standing on and strike you, or he might pause right below you. And so if he paused right below you, you would know to just continue walking, but if he goes through it and hits you, well, at least you didn't get knocked into a pit. And in this way, you get through this section. All in all, you only are really aiming to get through it, because once you get to Dracula's penthouse, I guess you'd call it, you restart there anyways. Regarding the section with the infinite harpies and hunchbacks, it's all about just watching. For the first section, really just don't fall into a pit, but for the second section on the bottom floor, it is just timing, where you'll see the harpy drop a hunchback, you'll see where it lands, hopefully in a pit, you drop down, and then slowly walk up the ladder, being mindful of any harpies coming your way so that you can go in between them, or possibly even strike them with your whip, and work your way up. Lastly is Dracula, which, I'll be honest, is actually probably fairly easy in the first phase. Very trivial, stand at a whip's length distance of him. When he does his, I don't know what you call it, his cape is up and he's about to shoot out the fireballs. Just before then, jump, the fireballs will pass under you, and as you are falling down, strike with the whip. You just keep doing that repeatedly. It's very slow and tedious, but it's simple enough. The worst that can happen is just you lose your patience, right? Now as for the second phase of Dracula, here's a secret tip, and I say secret because no one on this earth has mentioned it before, at least in anything I've seen. Even my companion others I haven't seen use it, but this boss is also actually deterministic, and I'd actually say the fairest boss in the game, outside of Dracula, whose AI is very basic too. For the second phase, what you want to do is strike the face, because again, the body, you don't really do damage. But here's the thing, there's two key points. One is, when you are getting close to the sides of the walls, duck it down, just kneel. That will trigger the boss to do a high jump, giving you a chance to walk under him. In this way, you avoid any issue of ever being trapped against the wall and taking an unnecessary hit. Note, if you do it too late, like where you're too close to the wall, he'll do the high jump, but hit the wall, right? And so when he bounces back, he'll bounce into you as you're walking under him. The second thing is, you want to take it slow again. So when you jump up to hit his face, sometimes wait a moment or two before you do the jump up and strike, because he might shoot his fireballs. And if you can see he's about to do that when you jump and strike, you can dispatch the fireballs as well, right as they come out of his mouth. So they're gone, you hit him, and then you can wail on him a bit before continuing on. Very quick, very easy. And in that way, we've beaten CastleVania I with whip only.